Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby Raczka. I'm the engagement manager for Philly Counts 2020. Philly Counts 2020 is a temporary office under the managing director for the city of Philadelphia. And we work in close partnership with the Census Bureau to ensure a complete and accurate count in Philadelphia. As you probably know by now, it is incredibly important that we get an accurate count because it impacts our representation federally and locally, and it also impacts the amount of funding that we receive for public services. So this is a really critical time that we make sure that we're getting this right. And what we're talking about today is, how do you do this kind of engagement and outreach work during a pandemic, which is really crisis communications. And so just to give you an idea of where we are, Philadelphia is only just over half responded as far as percentage of households that have gotten back to the census. And in the state, we're at 67.4. So we are definitely behind. We're behind our 2010 numbers, and we're also pretty significantly behind the country average. However, when you look at comparable cities with similar demographics, as far as socioeconomic status and racial makeup, we are actually pretty much in line with most of the major cities that you would kind of consider comparable to Philadelphia. So it is not a unique challenge that we're experiencing, but we are definitely very aware of the challenges. And honestly, even before the pandemic, there were a lot of challenges to be considered. So I want to touch on those a little bit so we can really have the full context of the problem that we're facing here. So in the 2020 census, you are able to respond for the first time ever online. This is beneficial for many of us. I know I certainly responded online, as well as the majority of my peer group and family. But we do know that there is a significant digital divide in Philadelphia. Some folks just don't have access, and other folks maybe just aren't as comfortable using the internet or using their computer in this way. So when you hear that it's the first digital census or the first online census, you might think that you're no longer able to do it by paper, which is the way that many folks, particularly our senior folks, are most comfortable doing it. And our seniors are a population that we know are historically undercounted. So this is just one kind of example of issues that we're looking at. Another really significant challenge we were facing is the overall operations of the census in 2020 was significantly funded significantly less than previous years. Part of that was due to the presumption that because it was offered online, that it would cut back on some of the costs, right? But this cut out money that had been historically used to grant community organizations who've been deeply connected and who are doing authentic engagement work, giving them money to get out information about the census was really important in previous years, right? Because they're your trusted messengers. So not having those grants was really problematic. It also impacted the hiring and training of staff at all levels of the operation. It impacted the amount of marketing, the amount of materials that could be created, and more. The ongoing fear tactics are something that we have been very aware of from the beginning. I'm sure that many of you recall early on, there was the possibility of a citizenship question being added to the census. This is highly unconstitutional because it threatens the sanctity of the census. It's really important that we're counting all people. This is not a political move. This is about making sure that states and cities have the resources that they need, right, to take care of people. And so by frightening people, right, who may not be here under a documented status into thinking that this might be used as a tool against them, you really are causing a major issue with the count, right? Particularly in cities that consider themselves sanctuary cities, right? Where our immigrant community feels comfortable here, right? And so we want that to be matter of fact. We don't want people to feel unsafe. And so this is kind of like I said, a threat to the sanctity of the process. Most recently, there was a new memo on counting non-citizens that stated that all non-citizens that responded to the census would be removed from the count. Again, this is incredibly unconstitutional. It will not be allowed to pass. Already, cities and states across the country are signing on to a legal case, right, to ensure that this does not happen, cannot happen. Similarly, this is how the citizenship question was kept off of the census because cities and states band together and said that this was really problematic and it would threaten the accurate count that we know that we need. So we do not think that, we know that this will not go past where it is now, but we also know that the threat alone, as we saw with the citizenship question, has done the damage. So not only is this unconstitutional, this is something that they actually don't even have systems in place to do. They can't go backwards and wipe folks who, let's say, don't have a registered social security number because the systems don't talk to each other that way. Your information is confidential, constitutionally protected for 72 years. So those systems actually cannot give up that information. So not only is it unconstitutional, it's really not even feasible. But you know, like I said, the threat alone has done significant damage. So we want to be aware that our neighbors and our friends and family in the immigrant community, even folks who are here under a documented status, have felt repeatedly threatened through this census process. And that's something that we need to acknowledge and really understand if we're going to be able to talk about this and make a difference in a meaningful way. So we've been doing phone banking, and I'll talk a little bit more about our phone banking shortly, but we've been talking to a lot of folks all across the city and asked them, you know, have you received your census? Have you completed your census? And about 17% of the people we talked to said they have not received a single invitation. Now, the census mailer should have come to all of our houses at least about 5 times by now. So if you don't recall seeing not even one invitation, that's really a sign of a problem. And while we can't necessarily pinpoint where that problem is, where the direct causality is, what we know is many people aren't getting it, right? And so with the issues that we're facing with the Postal Service, right, that are incredibly relevant right now, especially while we're talking about things like mail-in ballots, this is only going to get worse, right? The stay-at-home order, right, also caused some new challenges that we weren't necessarily expecting. College students in the census should be counted where they go to school. This is incredibly relevant for Philadelphia, right? Because we have, you know, dozens of schools in the vicinity. So if we're not counting our college students, that's a huge number of people and a significant amount of resources that aren't coming here. So we want to make sure that college students know they should be counted at school, right? Well, unfortunately, by the time the census really got started, a lot of the students had already been sent home for the stay-at-home order, making it even more complicated, right? And many of those students aren't coming back. So again, you know, if I'm living at home, whether I go to school at Temple or not, if I'm home with my family, you know, that's where I'm gonna probably think I should be counted because that's where I am, especially when you use a reference date of April 1, right? It's like college students are an exception to the rule, and that hasn't really been properly marketed. So that's another issue with the stay-at-home order. And also with the stay-at-home order, we're talking about hiring and training staff, particularly staff that's going to go door to door. And so all of that has been made more complicated as well. And we are also operating under a shortened timeline. So when all of the information about the stay-at-home order came out, you know, it was discussed how we were going to move forward with the census operation. It was originally planned to be extended through October. Unfortunately, it was announced recently that it would actually go through the end of September. So if you take away those 30 days or so, right, that's like a 30% reduction in the amount of time that we have to complete this. And what we know is those who are most undercounted, who are historically most undercounted, are those who are most vulnerable in our communities. And all of that is just exacerbated by a pandemic, right? So we really want to be conscious about how we are reaching folks who are living in poverty, people who have low access to internet, people of color, children, people experiencing homelessness, seniors, immigrants. All of these folks will be most impacted by the shortened timeline, right? Because we won't have as much opportunity to engage with them and to convince them that this is important and that they should do this and feel safe doing it. So now that we've talked about all of the challenges, Let's talk a little bit about solutions, right? And so the thing about crisis communications is that everything feels incredibly urgent and time sensitive. And so you want to push things out right away, right? Well, let's fight that instinct because that's how you get things wrong, right? And so the first thing that we want to do is we want to stop and think about this, right? We have a short amount of time that we're working with. We have all these other variables that are making it more complicated as far as how we can interact, when and where we can interact with people. And so the first thing we need to do is really stop and understand the context, right? What are the new ways that we can interact with people? How can we partner with our network, with our stakeholders, with our other city departments? How can we make sure we're being as effective as possible and using the time that we have in a way that really makes a difference, right? So we made a plan. We worked closely with the Census Bureau, to make sure that as the information is changing, we have the most up-to-date information, right? Because step one is to make sure you're pushing out accurate information, right? So we made a plan on how we can connect with folks. We activated our networks around this plan, and we provided everyone with content, whether it was physical content or digital content, that had the clear, concise, consistent message that we need folks to know. So we redesigned a lot of our materials because you want to make sure that you are not being tone deaf, right? So I am a representative of the city of Philadelphia, right? I'm not just Philly Counts. I'm not just talking about the census, right? If I introduce myself as a city employee, then I'm now representing the city as a whole. Most people don't differentiate one department from another, right? And so we have to be cognizant of the fact that the folks that we're trying to reach and talk to about this form that's most people consider to be very archaic, if they even know what the census is, right? So the first barrier is awareness at all. Do people know what we're talking about? And so we redesigned a lot of our materials to talk about public health, right? And how in a post-pandemic world, we're going to need these resources that we're talking about more than ever. And that when it comes to rebuilding our economy and healing our communities, that this funding is going to be critical, right? And that having the right amount of representation and the right people representing us is really going to make a difference over the next 10 years. It always will, but now we're really understanding even more vividly how directly this can impact us. So we've been, like I said, we've been engaging our network. We've been over the past year and a half partnering with all kinds of stakeholders from our community agencies and registered community organizations to city departments to elected officials. Folks have really come through and understood the value and the importance of this process. And so we've been building relationships and connections with these folks for a year and a half. It's not like, okay, here we are in March, the census is starting, what can you do, right? We've been leading up to this for a very long time, right? And so we had a really clear plan that was going to kick off from March to July and kind of this get out the count effort. And with the stay-at-home order, like I said, it all had to be revamped. So the new materials had to be created and printed. We had to figure out safe ways to get those materials delivered and all these things. So we worked closely with our partners to make sure that, we were meeting them where they are, right? So what is it that you need? Are you doing a lot of virtual events? Because we can supply you with a virtual background for your Zoom. We can get you t-shirts and swag that you can wear while you're having these virtual events, right? We can design materials that are targeting your constituents, right? So the people you are serving, we want the message to reach them and make them feel like we're talking to them. We're not just talking to Philly at large, right? Philly's a city of neighborhoods. There's all different kinds of people here, right? And we want to celebrate the diversity, the richness of the culture here. And in order to do that, you have to really, watch your tone, right? You have to pay attention to the imagery you're using and all of those things, right? So all of this is part of your basic communications plan. But under a COVID plan, you really want to keep into account that the folks that we're talking to are our most vulnerable populations, right? And so these folks are most impacted by the pandemic as well. They've maybe lost their jobs, right? Their kids probably are home all the time and they may or may not have childcare. They may be worried about having food that week, right? Am I gonna be able to eat today? If I'm worried about whether or not I can eat today, the priority that the census has is gonna be probably pretty low, right? So I can't just call you like, this is Philly Counts, we're just calling to make sure you filled out your census, right? That would be incredibly insensitive and not helpful. It's not gonna make you wanna fill out your census. It's gonna make you wanna hang up on me, probably, right? And so these are the things that we think about in our crisis communications plan, right? Is how can we incorporate what people really need and what people are thinking about now with our message and our priority, right? So one of the things that we did was we did door hangers. We did over 300,000 door hangers in targeted areas. We also sent materials to the food distribution sites, right? So, the folks that we were talking about who might not be able to feed their family this week, right? They're gonna prioritize getting to the food site. So we can just be there, right? We don't have to be pushy about it. We can just be available. Do you have any questions about the census, right? Please take home some information about this, And so, like I said, we really just wanna be meeting people where they are, because you can't ask people to do one more thing when the world's falling apart around them, right? So the food distribution sites, the play streets, and this is great too, because a lot of this was in partnership with city agencies. So again, we've been working with you already. You already know it's all about getting out the census, right? So I'm gonna call the rec centers and I'm gonna say, listen, rec centers, do you need more materials? Because I'm doing a delivery. Like, what can I bring you? Can I bring you more swag? Can I bring you more materials? And they've been great. Again, all of our partners have just been tremendous. We have increased our phone banking, which we do in partnership with the Mayor's Commission on Aging and volunteers from all across the city. And we have had over 200,000 phone calls made, which equated to about 26,000 conversations, connecting folks with services and city resources. And then helping, if folks will continue to talk to us, right? We've made about 12,000 plans to complete the census, right? So how will you complete your census? Will you go online? Do you have access at home? Do you need to go to a facility? Will you do it on your phone? And just kind of really helping folks make a plan like you would do with voting, right? Like, yes, I pledge to go vote. I plan to go vote before work. I plan to ask my neighbor if they need to go vote, right? If they need help to go vote. And so when people make these plans, right, psychologically, it makes them more likely to do a thing. And so the phone banking hopefully will lead from those 12,000 people, right? The goal is that at least half of them will then go on and complete their census. And so we've seen actually in the areas that we've targeted with phone banking, we've seen the numbers come up a little bit as we track these response rates. So that is reassuring that these conversations are having an impact. And with the, factoring in, we were already doing phone banking, right? But factoring in the pandemic, we added things to our phone bank script, like, do you and your family have access to food? Do you know about the city food centers? Do you need to know where your local food center is? Do you and your family have access to medical care? Do you know where your local health center is? So just making sure that people are aware of the resources that are around them. And some folks are like, no, I'm okay, I don't need it. But the fact that we asked makes the rest of the conversation more meaningful, right? Because I'm not just calling for you to do the thing I want you to do, I'm calling to make sure you're okay first and foremost. After that, we can talk about the census. We've also been doing census caravans, which are like kind of fun, safe, socially distanced things that you can do. We've got the megaphone out. We've done it with a couple different elected officials now and kind of weave through the different neighborhoods that we know have been low response so far. And again, we have seen a bit of an uptick in those areas where we have been, trying to do raising awareness activities. And like I said, the caravans are really fun. You get to kind of like wave your pom-poms and holler out the window and throw out masks and buttons and things that people might actually enjoy having. So that's another one of the things that we kind of did as a pivot, right? So like in a time where you can't gather, what can you do to help raise awareness? Another thing that wasn't in our initial plan, but was definitely added in after the stay-at-home order is ad buys. So initially we decided that it was not the most effective use of our budget to purchase a lot of advertising, that the real impact came from when you hear the message from people you trust. So instead of investing in commercials and printed ads, we invested in training community members to talk about the census. And I believe that some of my teammates maybe did 1 or 2 Census Champion trainings with you guys early on. So you might be aware of the Census Champion program that we did. We trained almost 10,000 people to talk confidently about the census and to answer frequently asked questions. So if I'm hearing it from a TV ad, you know, it's in the back of my mind. It might impact me on more of a subconscious level. But if I hear it from my, you know, from my sister, and then I hear it again from my teacher, and then I hear it again from, you know, my neighbor, and then I see it on the radio, or then I see it on the bus stop ad, you know, it takes about 7 times for a person to hear a message and be driven to action. And so the more that you hear it from people you trust, the more powerful it is, the more likely it is to change your mind. So we worked really closely with community partners to train folks all across the city. This was like a 1-hour training that people voluntarily took to be more informed about the census so that they could make a difference in their community. So that was a really inspiring thing to see too, how eager people were to come out and do that. But as I said, you know, with the stay-at-home order, we did have to pivot. And so we decided that we should be investing in advertising because more people are watching TV, right? More people are stuck at home and people are face-to-face less often. So we have to, you know, kind of figure out where we can get in, where we fit in. We did invest heavily in the kind of print, more local ads. So we went with the Sunday Sun, with the Tribune, with El Sol. We partnered with Aldea, and we focused heavily in our immigrant communities and also in our predominantly African-American communities, right? Because we know that people of color are less likely to complete the census for lots of reasons, not least of which is distrust in government. We talked a little bit about the colleges and universities. I do want to come back to this for a second. Our colleges and universities are actually some of the lowest response areas in the city. And so understanding why this is a challenge, right? In crisis communications, right? You're going to make your plan. So let's fully understand the context of the issue first, right? Why is this a challenge? This is a challenge because a lot of folks aren't here anymore, and they may or may not have been counted at home and think that they can't be counted at school now because they've already been counted at home, or whatever the case may be. And so what we did was we worked with our, we have a subcommittee. We have a lot of different subcommittees, but one of them is on colleges and universities. And so we connected with our higher ed subcommittee, and we worked to provide them with a toolkit so that they had everything they need to get the message out to their students. This included social media posts. It also included slides for the professors who were hosting classes online so that they could incorporate in the beginning and the end of their lecture a quick slide that said, take 5 minutes and complete your census. And, you know, we've also obviously been trying to get materials out anywhere that it makes sense, but with folks not being there, the materials have been less relevant. So it's been mostly a digital effort for the college students, which again, when you think about meeting people where they are, our college students are online for sure, they're on social media. And so partnering with the schools and also with local organizations to make sure that that message is getting out there. If you follow #PhillyCounts, you'll see like people really are sharing our content. And so that has been working, it would appear. And so we update our toolkits regularly. And we also, we have one specifically right now that's talking about not just the census, but also the importance of voting, right? And how do you like bring these ideas of get civic together? So it's not just like complete your census and vote, right? It's like, let's do these things in a way that actually can have a meaningful impact, right? We might as well bring it all together. It's all about taking back our democracy, right? And really taking ownership. And so really just reminding people that this can go into all of the things that you're already doing, right? Because our partners who have been engaged with us thus far are doing civic-minded work, right? They're already doing get out the vote stuff. They were already planning to do get out the vote stuff. So if we can align our message with what they're already talking about, it becomes even easier to plug in. So again, we send out toolkits regularly to our entire email list, and we host regular partner calls to make sure people have what they need. Like if our social toolkit is not serving you, what is it that you need, right? Because we want to create it. We want to make sure you have the right materials to get the message out. So one of the things that we're working on in this current toolkit is to get the COVID-19 bill to include an extended deadline for the count and the report. And so ways that you can help that effort is to call your local officials and urge them to extend the statutory reporting deadline for the 2020 census. Again, it only takes a couple minutes, right? The beauty of these actions is that they're simple. You can do them while you are waiting in line at the grocery store, you know, like you can do them in the in-between moments, right? Using the pauses effectively. And so we have a sample script. We have all this information available in the toolkit, and we will continue to update the toolkit with more information on the mail-in ballots and all of that. So, you know, we really want to keep in mind what people have on their mind. One of the big concerns that we know people have is folks impersonating a census taker for lots of reasons, not the least of which is the threat of an ICE agent, for example, pretending to be a census worker, or somebody with intentions of harming you or getting into your home, right? And so how can we get ahead of that, right? We know that that's probably going to come up, right? Because anytime sensitive information is being shared, people want to take advantage of it. So we created graphics that talk about how you know who the enumerator is, right? So what are the signs? Well, they'll have a briefcase. They will have a device that will have a logo on it. They will have a name badge. They will not ask you to come out of your home, right? There's certain things that you can be equipped with in advance so that you feel safe when somebody comes knocking on your door. However, a really persuasive message we found is if you complete your census early, then no one will come to your door, right? This was already persuasive, but post-COVID became even more important, right? Because we want to minimize the amount of interaction that we're having anyway. So all of that was included in our toolkit. These are some other graphics that were included. This is a tweet from Congressman Evans. Their office created this meme, which we love, and share to not just, you know, show that Congressman Evans is supporting, but also to show that you can come up with your own memes, right? There's other fun, creative ways you can get this message out. It doesn't have to be something we created. We are happy to help push out and to spread your message as well. Another thing that we've been doing is mobile questionnaire assistance sites. So the Census Bureau is running mobile questionnaire assistance sites. This was already part of their plan, but they did put some additional funding towards it post COVID. And so we've been working with our partners and community service agencies to make sure that they are going to the right places. Right? So if you're going to go stand out somewhere with a tablet, right, let's make sure it's somewhere where you're going to get people counted. So we've been partnering with groups who've been requesting to have a mobile questionnaire assistance site at their event, for example, or at their food distribution site, or at their you know, community shred day, or whatever it is that people are doing, having the Census Bureau there on site to help actually complete your census, but also to help answer any questions. We've actually gone as far, at Philly Counts, we've gone as far as working to get tablets and Chromebooks so that we can actually go out to folks who maybe don't have the access, or, you know, and just kind of maybe have questions and just be like, hey, you can do it right now. You know, do you have questions? I'm here to help, like whatever you need. You know, it only takes a couple minutes. And so, for example, tomorrow we're going to go to one of the backpack giveaways that the school district is hosting, and we're going to try to catch folks in line in their cars, right, before the giveaway starts. And again, it only takes like 5, maybe 10 minutes if you've got a lot of people in your house. It really doesn't take very long to complete. So any of those opportunities where we can catch a captive audience, you will see us. We will be there. So we have more materials available. If you are involved in an organization, or if you if there's an info table in your building and you feel like you could put some materials out there, please let us know. You can request materials from us at bit.ly/PhillyCountsSwag. Or you can also email census@phila.gov. We definitely want to make sure that we are getting materials out there. We have currently available full page flyers. We also have palm cards. We have buttons and stickers. We have more items on order, so we will be getting some other things in hopefully in the next 2 weeks. We only have about 6 weeks left to get this done. So anything that you might be able to get out, we wanna provide. So please let us know if that's something that you're interested in. So moving forward, we talked about, making sure that people have the information they need, right? Meeting them where they are, and talking about the issues that are concerning our communities the most. So we gotta stay relevant, right? Can't just be about the census because there's way too much going on. So we are working with the city commissioners to make sure that we are sharing accurate information about voting, and helping with the poll worker recruitment efforts, right? I don't know about you guys, but I've been voting at my polling location for 11 years since I was, old enough to vote. And it's always the same folks, right? They're always out there. But a lot of those folks are seniors, right? A lot of them are immunocompromised. A lot of them are not trying to be at the polls this year. And some are risking their lives to do so. So we have been working to try to help recruit. What we know is that folks who are civic minded, right, they want to be involved. So if they're on our listserv, if they're interested in the census, they're probably also interested in voting, right? Because it's all connected. And if they're not, we're going to get them interested in it. That's the goal. So on one side of the palm card, we have census messaging. We were gonna try to create a dual mail-in ballot message. However, we wanted to push out a deadline that was a little bit earlier with all of the complications with the Postal Service, and the messaging got too diluted basically. And so in order to get it approved by the city and the city commissioner's office, we really didn't have enough time to produce the palm cards that we wanted. So instead we put it on the lawn signs. So you have a QR scanner, so you can do 2020census.gov to complete your census, or you can go on to registered PA voters.gov, I believe it is, and sign up for your mail-in ballot. So and we posted almost 200 of those all across the city. So if you happen to drive by a park or a main street, if you're on the drive, either of them, you might see some Philly Counts lawn signs. Feel free to snap a photo and shout us out if you're so inspired. But yeah, so we're over the next 6 weeks, we're gonna continue to push out census first, since we are reaching that deadline first, but we are also going to be working on voter messaging as well, because it's all about getting civic, right? And taking back our democracy. It's not just about the census. It's definitely bigger than that. So I wanted to leave some time for questions or suggestions. We really want to hear from folks on if you have ideas on things that we could be doing better, or things that we maybe haven't thought of yet. We are open to all kinds of ideas. We are always looking for volunteers. Please stay in touch with us. You can join our email list by emailing census@phila.gov and just requesting to be added to the list. We do bi-weekly calls with updates for information that might be changing. A lot of information is changing very quickly. And so we usually have great attendance on our partner calls, because what we really know is that our people are invested in this process. And so we want to continue to be there for them and make sure that we get a complete and accurate count for Philly. And with that, I know that was a lot of information, but I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Gabby. Appreciate it. Yeah, if there are any questions, you can throw them in the chat, unmute yourself, whatever works for you.
I have a quick question. So do you ever hear, and thank you for that awesome presentation, by the way. Do you ever hear from community members, just like, I don't know, sort of like anecdotes about like why the census is important to them? Like maybe they're participating for the first time, and that's something that they share with their family members and neighbors, as you sort of mentioned. You ever like hear those stories and share them out?
Absolutely. We are before we had to all go home, we were in communities a lot. And so people would share stories with us about, you know, why it matters to them, or why they're invested in making sure there's a complete and accurate count. I think the most moving stories for me tend to be ones about the youth, about the next generation. If you think about the impact over the next 10 years, right? The folks who aren't yet able to use their voice, they need us to stand up for them, right? And so folks who have kids, or folks who work in schools, or after school programs, anybody that works with young people tends to always kind of move me when it comes to their motivations behind making sure the count is right. A lot of folks who have been, like I talk about our poll workers, right? A lot of these folks are also block captains, and a lot of these folks are presidents of their, you know, neighborhood association. And so, you know, it's really inspiring, and it's really powerful to see somebody who's dedicated decades to serving their community. They don't really need to give you a reason, right? But I don't know, I just feel like it speaks volumes without necessarily saying anything.
Thank you for sharing that.
Cool. Well, if there are no other questions, I guess we can call it a wrap on that. Gabby, thank you again for all the information. Really appreciate it. And especially a big thank you for doing the work you're doing at a time like this. I can only imagine. I actually had an enumerator come to my door yesterday looking for my neighbor, and I could tell just how exhausted he was. So again, really appreciate the effort.
That's a good point. And if we have some extra time, I will kind of elaborate on that a little bit. So the process of census response is that ideally we all self-respond, right? The self-response is the most accurate way to get this information, is if I tell you how many people live in my house. The second most accurate way is if I ask your neighbor. And then I always say, like, if you ask me, who lives on either side of me, I can tell you for sure, I got, you know, Miss Phyllis is over here, and I got Rhonda and Andre over here. And I could probably go even one house further on either side and tell you pretty accurately how many people live in your house. You could probably do that too, right? So that's the kind of second most accurate way. You will get less information, right? Like, you're not gonna get that person's birth date or things like that, but at least you have a general idea of how many people are in and out of the house. If you don't get a neighbor to respond, which, I mean, let's be honest, in Philadelphia, most people, if you knock on somebody's door and are like, how many people live next door to you? They're gonna be like, do I tell you that? Like, what? Like, it seems a little bit suspect, right? So the kind of worst case scenario, the last resort is to estimate. And the estimate that they use is based on the average. And so nationwide, right, all the people who respond, the average is usually about 2.5 people per household. Now, when we're talking about our historically undercounted communities, what we know is that that is not the average, right? Like, for example, there's some boarding houses, right, that folks live in just a room. And so, you know, if you're living in a home, it could look like a single family unit. It could have 6 people in it, right? And they probably all don't even feel comfortable sharing their personal information with each other to fill out one census form. So once we get to the part where we're guessing, where we're estimating 2.5 per household, we are severely undercounting folks. And, you know, another example I use is, like, if I'm in PHA, if I'm in public housing and I have a limit on how many people are supposed to live with me, and I don't really understand the kind of confidentiality of the census, which, I mean, most people don't, then I'm not going to want to say I have 6 people here. I'm going to say, if I do decide to respond, I'm going to say I have 4 people here. So again, we know where the undercount will take place, and we know that there will be an undercount. And so we're working really hard to do everything we can to bring those numbers up closer to where we know they should be. And I know that in 2010, Philadelphia did work to get that number increased, because we had some evidence that we could use to say, like, this number is too low, we need to bring this up. And if need be, I know that the city will be doing that again. But in the meantime, we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to at least get as close as possible. so we don't have to kind of have that fight down the line.
Gotcha. Cool. That's great to know. Yeah, hopefully they don't have to come back, and hopefully they can get a hold of them next time. But yeah, appreciate that. And again, thank you for all the information today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I count, you count.
Sure.
Philippines.
Yeah. Good way to sign off. All right, everyone. Have a good evening.
So much, Gabby.